My name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, today's episode covers what happened after the Battle of Agincourt, what led up to the so-called Battle of Beaujais, and the tragic turn of events that led to the death of that mighty King of England, Henry V. Almost 5 years after the Battle of Agincourt, we have the Treaty of Troyes. That's Troyes in English, Troyes in French. It was signed on the 21st of May 1420, but this comes after Henry V's, King of England's, successful campaigning in Normandy in France. The treaty was basically this: when the King of France, Charles VI, dies, Henry V inherits the crown of France, and thereon his heirs. But there's this little thing here that he must marry Catherine of Valois, the king's daughter. She will then become Queen of France and Queen of England. The problem with all of this is it disinherits the Dauphin, Charles, the king's son. Now this it's quite something, but when you read into it, you see that the Queen of France, Isabeau of Bavaria, her husband, the King of France, is suffering from mental illness. She doesn't trust her son, the Dauphin. She wants a strong king to rule both kingdoms of England and France, which will bring about the peace that she so much desires. So it all sounds really good. The problem was the Dauphin was not going to take his disinheritance lying down. Now, once the treaty had been signed, on the 2nd of June, 1420, Henry marries Catherine of Valois. There should be peace. Many historians regard this signing of this treaty as the end of the 100 Years' War, the end of the wars between England and France. But the wars that are going to follow on from this, they're not just between England and France. You have the English, the Burgundians, the French, the Scots. The English will fight with the French against the French, with the Burgundians against the Scots. Hey, isn't this exciting? So this now all leads on to the Battle of Beaujais. Let's see what happens. So after the marriage of Catherine of Valois to Henry V of England at the Troyes Cathedral in France, off they go to England. And Catherine is crowned Queen of England 23rd of February 1421 at Westminster Abbey. They then go on a tour, sometimes together, sometimes separately, around England. Now, Henry had left his younger brother, the Duke of Clarence, in charge of affairs in France. He was the head of the English army and must continue to subdue any of the castles held by the Dauphin forces. Now, I heard the Dauphin, it was Dauphinois forces. Well, to me, Dauphinois is a certain kind of potatoes. So let's just call it the forces of the Dauphin. Now, there's an interesting thing here, the politics of the day. You see, you've got to add an extra army into all of this mix. You have the English, you have the Burgundians, who are a political faction against the French. They were led by John the Fearless, who just a year before all this takes place had actually been assassinated at a so-called peaceful meeting between him and the Dauphin. So there's distrust here. And now you have Philip, known as Philip the Good, who is the head, the leader of the Burgundians. So you have the loyal French, led or under the reign of the slightly mad Charles VI. Then you have the rebellious French under the Dauphin, who is supported by the Scots, a strong army under John, Earl of Buchan, and Archibald, Earl of Wigtown. These Scots are actually the mainstay of the rebellious French army. So you then have the English, the Burgundians, the Scots-French, as well as the loyal French. So you imagine trying to do negotiations at this time. So you imagine a triangle. And at the top triangle you have the English, together with the loyal French Charles VI's people. And then down in the other corner, you have the Burgundians. And then in the other one, you have the rebellious French under the Dauphin together with the Scots. So you might be negotiating with the Burgundians, who might be negotiating with the rebel French, who might actually also be negotiating with the English. It was very, very complicated. But there again, politics are, aren't they? But tragically, while all this is going on, England is on its knees financially. France is on its knees financially. They have had these decades upon decades of war. It has to come to an end. But it doesn't, does it? You now have this great Scottish army, I think 4,000 to 5,000 men in strength, backing up the Dauphin. In fact, they are the mainstay of the Dauphin's army for several years. So whilst the king is on his processions throughout England with his new bride, the Duke of Clarence, the king's brother, has been left in charge of the king's affairs in France. He has 4,000 men, carries out a bit of a chevauchée, raids down in Anjou and Maine in France, mainly unopposed. They're quite successful. Now come Good Friday, the 23rd of March, 1421, the English army is camped at a place called Villers-Bauget. Foraging parties are sent out. They've got to gather food. There's a little bit of plundering going on. The normal things when the English are abroad in France. But what the English don't know is there is a French-Scots army in the vicinity. These are forces loyal to the Dauphin. Now, one of the English foraging parties manages to capture some Scottish soldiers. They are brought into the camp, and whilst he's eating his dinner, apparently he doesn't stop eating, these Scottish soldiers are questioned by the Duke of Clarence, who learns that there is this French-Scots army in the vicinity. He is all for attacking them. Now, Clarence, he really is eager. He wants to have a go, surprise the Scots. But the next day, you see, it's Easter Sunday, and the Earl of Huntingdon and Gilbert Umfraville, they counsel the Duke, hey, let's consolidate our forces, bring all of the men in from the fields, wait till we've got all of our bowmen. Tomorrow is church. Let's keep tomorrow for church. And here we have a kind of a record in the Chronicles of John Harding, apparently the rhyming Chronicles of John Harding, which record the conversation. Umfraville counsels, let's keep church tomorrow. We'll fight on Monday. And the Duke of Clarence says, if you're afraid, go home. Keep church. He then says, you had the luck, you knights had the luck to fight at Agincourt. I did not have that luck. Umfraville then turns to the Duke and says, we have but 10 men with us, but never let anyone say we left you. Staying with the Duke will cost Umfraville his life. So, as you can see, I've made a model. Now, the Battle of Beaujeu gets its name from a village further up the hill. I've chosen the action over the river Quesnon. Beaujeu further up, the Scots Franco army is also further up. What happens here is critical to the overall fight. The Duke of Clarence, without his archers, with some accounts say 1,500, some say just hundreds of men, are charging towards the Scottish army to surprise it. But the English are stopped at this little bridge. They can't ford the river, it's too muddy. So they've dismounted and they're now engaged in a fight with 100 or so Scottish soldiers who are determined to hold on. Amongst these Scotsmen are archers. So the English without their archers cannot reply to shot. It's a nasty fight. There is one little story that the Scots were actually there because they were playing football. Fitba. I like that. But now, as they engage in the fight, what I've shown you is now there is a messenger riding back to the main Scots army. So the Scots will gather their forces further back, ready to charge down the hill and engage the English army. But meanwhile, the English army have got a heck of a fight on here. The Scots are bravely defending the bridge, giving their compatriots way up on the hill there time to gather and get ready for the fight. The English don't have a reply to the archers that the Scots have brought with them, but eventually, as you can see, there's a fight here. They push the Scots back, and those who survive go and take refuge in the church. Meanwhile now, the Duke of Clarence is eager to get on, but their horses that they've had to dismount, they've tried to get them through the mud and all that, are very tired. And I've actually got the Duke of Clarence just here. He's remounted, he's got some of his men, and they are going to charge through here and then up the hill. But he doesn't know what's waiting for him. Between 4,000 and 5,000 men. And as I've said, he may have only had a few hundred. Now, they call this the Battle of Beaujeu. Well, the fact is, from the day somebody said, the battle began at sunset but finished at dusk. The Duke of Clarence is charging forward blind. He has no intelligence about what's waiting for him. And I'll tell you, as an ex-British soldier, as a veteran British soldier, you never went into operations unless you had intelligence, what lies ahead. But this man was a bit reckless. He charges forward, and Umfraville, faithful, charges with him. And they are simply, as they hit the Scots, they are enveloped and slaughtered. They never stood a chance. But it's what happens next was critical. The Scots and the French army retire back off the battlefield over the hill. They leave men on the battlefield to finish off the wounded, gather the bodies of Umfraville and the Duke of Clarence and booty and that kind of thing. Meanwhile, the rest of the English army, anything up to 4,000 men, under the Earl of Salisbury, who was coming the other way. He'd gathered all of these foraging forces, all those archers. They go across the bridge and they scour the battlefield, killing any of the enemy soldiers on the battlefield. And they gather, the English capture the baggage train, which contained the bodies of the Duke of Clarence and Umfraville, and they bring them back. But the Scottish and French army still don't pursue them. So the English are allowed to simply escape. The casualties, though, at Beaujeu, they're conflicting. One lot says there was 1,000 English dead and 500 captured. Another says there was only a few hundred actually took part in the fight up the hill. So we'll never know the true figures. Some say these are wildly exaggerated. Some even say it was never a battle, just a slaughter. But just imagine if the Scottish and French army had not retired back to Beaujeu, if they'd have stayed on the battlefield and attacked the English army as it came over the bridge. If they'd have defeated it, they would have driven the English out of France for the foreseeable future. But that didn't happen. Instead, what happens is it sets into motion a series of events that would prove tragic for both England and Henry V. When the king received the news of the death of his younger brother, he wasn't emotionally involved here. They weren't close, but he realised he's now got to come back to France himself. June 1421, with 4,000 extra troops, the king arrives. Now, Paris, which is being defended by the Burgundians and some English troops, is under threat. So immediately the king sets about relieving the pressure on Paris. He captures the town of Dreux, Vendôme, Beaugency. He even spends 3 days at Orléans. But he knows that he can't ever take it, not with the army he has at the moment. So he moves back north to Meaux. He's going to lay siege with an army of 20,000 men. That means he's got to feed 20,000 men, have the latrines, the accommodation for them. Well, they invest the siege on the 6th of October, 1421. Now, the town's defences were led by a brave but cruel and evil leader, Le Bâtard de Varus. They were determined to hold on, but the English now, 20,000 men laying siege to that place. I understand there was only 1,000 defenders. Anyway, the English undermined the walls are brought down, cannons are fired, but those defenders, they really did put up a brave fight. The siege dragged on for 7 months and 4 days. During the siege, one of the saddest stories I've read was the death of the 17-year-old John Cornwall. He was the only son to the famous John Cornwall, the first Baron Fanhope. They were standing there watching the siege when a gunstone blew off the head of the young John Cornwall. How terrible is that? But if you want the truth, it wasn't the guns being fired or arrows. The biggest threat to the 20,000 English surrounding that place was disease. There was an outbreak of smallpox and dysentery. Do you know the Siege of Meaux will claim the lives of over 6,000 Englishmen? But most importantly and tragically, one of those who fell ill towards the end of the siege was Henry V himself, and he would not be removed from the siege until they were victorious. When the garrison of Meaux surrendered, their leader, the Bâtard de Varus, was beheaded, as was a trumpeter, Horace, who had mocked our king, Henry V. But by the end of that terrible, terrible siege, Henry V was quite ill. In fact, he was unable to ride when they left. He was taken to Vincennes and he died on the 31st of August, 1422, aged just 35. He had learned, before his death, of the birth of his son at Windsor Castle back in England. His son, named Henry, was only 9 months of age. He was crowned Henry VI, King of England, in 1429 and King of France in 1431. But unlike his father, Henry VI would not rule with a strong hand, and tragically, the wars in France will continue. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? Have a look at what we do. There's some great perks there. We do have meetups, and I must admit they are great fun. Now, before I finish, a quick shout out to some of those Patreon members. And these are great names. Have a listen to this. Cindy Barrett, Michael Bowyer, Vincent Bate. Good, strong names. Now, without you guys and your support, we wouldn't be able to keep this show on the road. So, from me and from Julie, my wife, and Rupert the dog, thanks a million. Bye for now.